Welcome, I'm Iris Tao in for Steve Lance tonight. President Trump says the U.S. is imposing a new 100% tariffs on China starting this November. And that's after China hiked up restrictions on rare earth exports, a move that President Trump is calling a moral disgrace. NTD's Washington correspondent Jack Bradley has more.
President Trump announcing that China will pay an added 100% tariff on top of what they're currently paying to the U.S. That's as he's calling out the CCP for being very hostile and sinister with their new export controls on rare earth elements. On Truth Social, Trump wrote, starting on November 1st, 2025 or sooner, depending on any further actions or changes taken by China, the United States of America will impose a tariff of 100% on China over and above any tariff that they are currently paying. Also on November 1st, we will impose export controls on any and all critical software. This would bring tariffs on China up to 130%, 10% reciprocal tariff, 20% tariff due to China's fentanyl crisis, and now this latest 100% tariff. This comes as Trump said early on Friday that he's canceling a planned meeting with Chinese leader Xi Jinping. Both were expected to meet later this month in South Korea during the APEC summit. It's because the CCP is announcing new restrictions on exporting rare earth elements and other materials, which are used to make electronics from iPhones to missile defense systems, and the U.S. heavily relies on rare earths, of which China has an abundant supply. President Trump wrote on Truth Social, some very strange things are happening in China. They're becoming very hostile and sending letters to countries throughout the world that they want to impose export controls on each and every element of production having to do with rare earths and virtually anything else they can think of, even if it's not manufactured in China. This comes as the firings of federal workers are underway as the government shutdown enters its 10th day. The Director of Office of Management and Budget, Russ Vought, posted on X saying the RIF's reduction in force have begun. Congress has continually failed to pass a budget bill resulting in this shutdown, and with a shutdown, the president is granted the authority to decide what gets funded. President Trump has promised to use this as an opportunity to cut wasteful spending, targeting specifically Democrat programs and the people they employ.
And we'll be making cuts that will be permanent, and we're only going to cut Democrat programs.
The White House has not named the specific agencies affected, and these layoffs are separate from the furloughs. About half of the federal workforce remains furloughed as of today. Reporting by Jack Bradley, NTD News.
And President Trump announces a new deal that will lower drug prices for everyday Americans. He says it will save American taxpayers hundreds of millions of dollars each year.
AstraZeneca, the largest pharmaceutical manufacturer in the United Kingdom, is committing to offer Americans major discounts on their vast catalog of prescription drugs, one of the great companies, by the way, and a most favored nation's pricing clause. So most favored nation is you're going to pay whatever the lowest price anywhere in the world is. That's what you're going to be paying.
President Trump said AstraZeneca is committing to offer all of their prescription drugs to Medicaid at most favored nation prices. The president also announced that AstraZeneca will invest $50 billion in the U.S. in the next 5 years. The UK drug maker will also fund research and development of new drugs and onshore manufacturing facilities across the country, like the new plant in Charlottesville, Virginia. President Trump celebrating the deal as a tremendous victory for American patients. The Department of Homeland Security says families of ICE agents and other law enforcement agents have been receiving threats from Antifa. NTD's correspondent Jason Blair is joining us now live from Portland on the ground, where protests against ICE have been occurring for months. Good evening to you, Jason. What do you have on these threats that the DHS is now talking about?
Yeah, hey, Iris. So the DHS is saying that these threats are going to the family members of their federal officers, and they're saying that they're not going to tolerate it. They're going to go after these people and, quote, put them behind bars. They posted an example of one of these threats to the spouse of an ICE agent in Texas. And they said, quote, if you don't believe that radical anarchists want ICE law enforcement dead, then listen to this. So let's go ahead and play a clip from that threat to that spouse of the ICE agent.
And with a last name like that, I don't know how you let your husband work for ICE and you sleep at night. I hope your kids get deported by accident. How do you sleep? Did you hear what happened to the Nazis after World War II? Because that's what's going to happen to your family.
So here in Portland, near the ICE facility, there are helicopters, law enforcement helicopters that have been flying around regularly. The DHS sent out a warning about a so-called event planned for Saturday, calling for a mass of people to point laser lights at these helicopters all at once. I do have a copy of the flyer for this event, if we can show that. The flyer says, "You're invited to laser tag with a photo of a helicopter." It was posted by a self-described anarchist counterinfo platform website. The planned time for this so-called event is at 9 p.m. on Saturday. It also includes detailed information on how to avoid getting caught, because these lasers can be traced back fairly easily to the source by law enforcement. In fact, the Portland police arrested somebody for this just a couple of days ago for doing this very exact same thing. So the DHS warns that this is a federal crime and also very dangerous for the aircraft personnel.
Well, we have certainly seen some very strong words from the DHS in the past few days regarding these escalating tactics. Meanwhile, Jason, tell us more about how things have been recently outside of the ICE facility over there.
Well, they certainly haven't been boring. There have been a lot of activity going on. There were 2 arrests last night. 2 counter-protesters were arrested by the Portland police. This is what they told me. One was charged or had a warrant, according to the police. The other one was charged with harassment. I did not see these arrests happening, but based on photos, it looks like this counter-protester was trying to walk down the sidewalk, got blocked by looked like members of Antifa, and there was some kind of altercation going on involving a stick. The police intervened, and this individual was arrested. Now, also last night, when the officers were coming out of the facility, they did start chasing an individual, one of the protesters. I'm not sure if the protester did something as they were coming out or if they had already targeted this individual and then they recognized him and chased after him. They did not catch this person and did come back without him, but it looks like they were trying to arrest this person as well. So coming into the weekend, the DHS posted another warning people not to block the driveways of these ICE facilities, and possibly we'll be seeing more stricter enforcement on that coming into the weekend. I'll be there tonight reporting back. Back to you.
Well, Jason, we certainly know that a lot of the more heated protests and alterations sometimes actually happen at night. So stay safe out there, Jason. Thank you for the update. And ICE agents in Broadview, Illinois are losing their protective fence after a judge approves a request to take it down. Could this pose additional danger to law enforcement? Joining us now live to discuss is Democratic strategist Josh Lafazan, and as well as president of Winning Republican Strategies, Aaron Evans. Thank you both for joining us tonight. So Broadview officials have been saying about what's going on here, saying that the fence blocks a public road and could hinder first responders. So Aaron, could this pose additional danger to law enforcement in your view? And what do you make of the pushback that ICE is facing at every level right now?
Absolutely. I mean, look, regardless of politics, a lot of what we're seeing right now is a total obstruction of justice and also endangering our men and women in law enforcement. And the political differences, these men and women that go put on a badge each day and go out on the front lines to protect our country and to protect our communities, they're not voting in DC. They're not voting in state capitals. They're just doing their job. And what's happening is, we've got people who are putting them in harm's way instead of fighting the political battle in the political halls, and they're pulling these poor men and women in who's just trying to make a living, and they're putting their lives in danger. And honestly, it needs to stop.
And Josh, as our reporter from on Portland on the ground just told us, An Antifa-associated blog called the Rose City Counter recently just announced an event called Laser Tag, encouraging people to bring lasers and shine them at law enforcement helicopters this Saturday evening. The DHS is warning that aiming a laser pointer at an aircraft is a federal crime. Is this taking it too far, or what do you see of this current conflict between the two sides?
Sure, it's outrageous. And let me be categorical here. When it comes to civilian behavior, I couldn't state it more emphatically. You do not have a right to harm a member of law enforcement, and you do not have a right to engage in violent protest. Aiming a laser pointer at an aircraft is a reckless and dangerous. It's as dangerous as it gets, and hundreds of people can be killed from your one action. So absolutely, it's ridiculous. Doxing an ICE agent, so their children and spouses receive threats and harassment when they do not wear the uniform, should carry heavy consequences. And setting fire to government property is a violent act. And we, the taxpayers, end up bearing the cost, by the way. But there also has to be common sense here, because on the flip side, we as Americans and as citizens, we have a sacred and constitutionally protected right to protest. And oftentimes the Trump administration has spoken up in hostility to that, including this week. So ICE shooting a Presbyterian minister in the face with the pepper ball is unconscionable. Zip tying naked children is unacceptable no matter the circumstances. And even a Reagan-appointed judge acknowledged, quote, "In all of our history, we've never tolerated an armed, masked secret police." So to me, I believe just like New York City police officers to wear body cameras, I think ICE should wear body cameras as well. I think body cameras would protect civilians and officers alike, but I couldn't be more categorical. Anybody in their right mind who thinks it's okay to engage in violent protest, to harm a police officer, to blind a pilot should go to jail, and they should go to jail for a long, long time.
Well, definitely, like you pointed out, it could be very severe consequences if, say, a pilot actually gets distracted by the lasers. Well, could be, can't think of the consequence right there. I mean, well, on the topic of political violence, a man has now been arrested for sending death threats to conservative media personality Benny Johnson, and it comes just 8 days after, of course, we know the assassination of Charlie Kirk, which is nearing now its 1 month mark. So the man allegedly mailed letters describing a desire to orphan Benny Johnson's children and strangle Johnson with an American flag. Aaron, Bondi, AG Penn Bondi said that these threats were part of an Antifa plot linked to Kirk's shooting. How is the mindset behind this violence bigger than Antifa potentially? What do you see of this potentially force behind the current level of violence we're seeing?
Look, I think that it starts with rhetoric that has just gotten out of control, and it really has just hate-fed hate. And look, I live in Virginia, and I think we're front and center right now with this going on in Virginia with Jay Jones and the text that came out where he had fantasized not only about killing former Virginia Speaker Todd Gilbert, but also his children dying in the arms of their mother. I mean, this is evil. It's wicked. And of course, he's still running for office, and he doesn't have the shame to drop out as he should. But this should be very simple for members of either party to say, not only is this wrong, but hey, if this is who you are, you're not, we're not campaigning with you, we're not supporting you, we're not giving you money. And we've had two Virginia delegates who have had death threats that arrests have been made just this cycle. And then a story just broke yesterday with the Virginia Family Foundation, having, I think it was 10 to 12 death threats just in the last couple of weeks. So, I mean, we've got a real issue in politics where, and frankly, we need to get back to, just because we have disagreements doesn't mean that, and we can have very deep disagreements, but it doesn't mean that we're enemies. It doesn't mean that we have to hate one another. My colleague and I, we could have very different opinions, but it doesn't mean that either of us are less patriotic, and that either of us are and I think that's what we've got to hit reset. We've got to take a step back. We've got to get back to leaders leading in civility on both sides of the aisle, treating one another with respect on both sides of the aisle. Because the problem is when politicians use rhetoric to fire up the base. And again, this is This is something that has become very common in politics across the board. Neither party will address it the way that they should. Right now, much more Republicans in the crosshairs than Democrats. But this is everybody that loves this country and sees what's happening has to agree this is not the path forward. We've got to turn the rhetoric down. We've got to turn the heat down, and we've got to get back to leading with civility and respect and teaching some core values. And honestly, look, going back to the basics of even just teaching our kids, the core values of human life and respecting one another and just basic decency. So it's a massive problem, and it's beyond just a few extremists. We've got leaders of state tickets who are saying the same stuff, and so we've got to dial it back.
So Josh, I see you nodding your head during this. Of course, we are seeing, of course, a more heated rhetoric in politics nowadays. Do you think that's part of the issue? What's the best way, in your opinion, to deter people like that, who are making death threats to personalities as well as politicians alike?
Sure, I agree with Aaron wholeheartedly. Political violence is never okay. And I'm shaken to my core to learn of these plots. I have severe disagreements with Benny Johnson, as I did with many of the words of Charlie Kirk. But anybody who thinks they deserve to lose their life is mentally ill and should be monitored by the FBI. And anybody who threatens to carry out an action of violence against somebody else should be put in jail. And the polling on this, Iris, is a 5-alarm fire as a wake-up call for the country. NPR found that 1 in 4 Americans say violence against the government is sometimes okay. It's never okay. 0 times out of 100, it's okay. A September 2025 survey by FIRE, which is the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression, found that 1/3 of college students said it was acceptable to use violence to stop a campus speaker, not to apprehend a terrorist, but a literal speaker, in that words are violent. It is never okay to use violence to stop somebody from speaking. And even more concerning, when asked with whom they sympathize more, 45% of young Americans chose suspect Luigi Mangione, while 17% chose Brian Thompson, the innocent father who he allegedly killed. So let's be clear. This is a problem that affects all of us. And we need to call out everyone in our own parties engaging in this type of rhetoric. And so, Iris, you asked, how can we solve this? It means all of us. That means as a Democrat, I'm calling out people like Jay Jones, the Democratic candidate running for Virginia District Attorney, who suggested that the chamber's Republican speaker deserved to be killed. He should immediately drop out. He is an abomination to my party. And I asked my Republican friends to use their voices as well when Donald Trump calls Democrats rats or a problem we have to get rid of in front of the military. I asked them to call them out as well. So the answer to political violence is it takes all of us. There can be no harboring, no safe quarter. Anybody who even threatens political violence is abominable, a threat to our democracy. We should call them out and do it publicly.
Well, thank you both for your input on that front. Of course, we are hoping for a turning point amid an increased level of rhetoric as well as political violence right here. Well, shifting gears now to another topic, the White House Budget Office just today announced that mass firings of federal workers has begun. And some say that this is for Republicans to exert pressure on Democrats in Congress during this ongoing government shutdown. So first, Josh, do you think it's working? Do you see Democrats potentially budging on their position because of the mass firings, or do you think they're going to keep holding on to their position no matter what to keep this government shutdown going?
Sure. Well, Iris, this is an area where Aaron and I may disagree. If you look at public polling, by about a 20 to 30 point margin, most Americans blame Republicans, not Democrats, for the shutdown, which is A, restores my faith in common sense, and B, is accurate because Republicans control every branch of government. But you look at Russ Vought, who Trump himself calls the Grim Reaper. Take a look at what Trump and Vought are doing. They've cut $18 billion in New York City funding for the Hudson River Tunnel project and a subway extension. Again, New York City is only the financial capital of the world. I guess we'll go ahead and punish them. $8 billion in Energy Department funds for climate projects would be canceled in more than a dozen Democratic-leaning states because, again, energy prices are at an all-time high. Who needs more energy production? Not a single project or a single source of funding from any red states were cut, while blue states get cut, and blue counties make up 71% of the GDP. And of course, the continued funding for the $200 million White House ballroom, the $1 billion in upgrades to the Qatari jet, $20 billion bailout for Argentina, training the Qataris in Idaho, all of it's there. So in my opinion, Vogt is not only displaying a brazen and partisan disregard for the welfare of Democrats who make up half the country, but he's also, in my opinion, setting a dangerous precedent because he denies the legitimacy of what's called the 1974 Impoundment Act. He says that Trump has the final say in appropriations, not Congress. Respectfully, the Supreme Court disagrees when they upheld this law in Train versus New York City in 1975. So, in my opinion, if Russ Vogt wanted to make fair cuts and Republicans and Democrats had to take some pain because of the shutdown, that's another story. But in my opinion, this is partisan hackery at the very worst. That's what I believe Russ Vogt is doing.
So very quickly, Aaron, for you to respond before I let you go here, what do you think about the administration's moves to pull some funding from some projects that you're calling democratic, and as well as, do you think it's fair for the White House to now use this opportunity of the shutdown to reduce the size of the government?
I mean, look, every issue that my colleague just mentioned could be resolved very quickly and easily by Senator Schumer supporting reopening the government. And so, you know, I think ultimately we only need 8 Democrat senators to actually step up and say, we're going to put America first and we're going to reopen the government. And they're not doing that. And so, I mean, I think ultimately, you know, every single issue that we're discussing could be resolved tonight if Chuck Schumer would bring 8 Democrats back in and basically say, look, we're ready to reopen the government. But instead, they're focusing on cheap political shots and focusing on again, you know, political angling instead of keeping the government open and functioning. And so, and by the way, going against all the rhetoric we've heard over the years, when the shoe's been on the other foot, you know, they're doing the opposite of everything that they've said for the last 2 decades.
Well, certainly a lot of debate right now on both political maneuvering, as both sides are accusing each other of doing, as well as the ongoing shutdown, which hopefully will be resolved soon. So both Josh and Aaron, thank you so much for both of your insights tonight. Appreciate it.